It is the year 48 BCE when our story begins, and a life that ordinary Egyptians are only beginning to understand. Their queen. The young woman who calls herself Cleopatra the Seventh, Philopater, Thea Neoterra, is unlike any Ptolemy who has ruled before her. Most Egyptians have never seen her face, but they know her presence in ways both subtle and profound. When the tax collectors arrive at harvest time, they come in her name. When the grain ships depart Alexandria's harbor, laden with wheat that will feed half the Mediterranean, they sail under her authority. When the great temple at Dendera receives its offerings, the reliefs on its walls show her. She is only 21 years old, this queen, but already Egypt's fate is bound to hers in ways no one can yet imagine. In the farming villages along the Nile, life follows rhythms that are older than memory. Rhythms that Cleopatra understands perhaps better than any of her Greek ancestors ever did. The farmers wake before dawn, when the air is still cool and gentle, when the eastern sky holds that particular quality of light that seems to promise something. They move through their morning routines, washing at the river's edge, saying the old prayers that their grandparents taught them, prayers that predate the Ptolemies by millennia. The farmers know, in a way that transcends politics, that their queen is different. Word has spread, slowly, the way important news spreads in agricultural communities, passed from village to village by merchants and priests. Cleopatra speaks Egyptian, proper Egyptian, not the halting phrases of a foreigner, but the language of their mothers and fathers. When she visits the temples, and she visits them often, she doesn't need interpreters standing between her and the priests. She speaks directly, her voice carrying the intonations of Egypt itself. This matters more than the farmers can explain, even to themselves. The Ptolemies have ruled for almost 3 centuries, since Alexander's general Ptolemy claimed Egypt as his prize. But they have always been foreign. Greek, Macedonian, other. They built Alexandria on Egypt's coast, a gleaming Greek city that might as well be on another continent for all it resembles Memphis or Thebes. They spoke Greek, wrote Greek, thought Greek. Egypt was their possession, their treasure house, but not their home. But Cleopatra, she has learned Egyptian, not just the language of the common people, but the ancient hieroglyphic script that decorates temple walls. She reads the old texts, understands the old prayers. When she appears at religious festivals, dressed in the traditional sheath dress of an Egyptian queen, the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt upon her head, it doesn't seem like theater. It seems like recognition, like remembrance. The morning sun climbs higher, and in a village near Thebes, a farmer named Amenemhat walks to his field. His name is old, connecting him to the great pharaohs of the Middle Kingdom, though his family owns no more than a few aruras of land. He thinks about the queen as he guides his wooden plow behind his ox, because everyone has been thinking about the queen lately. The priests at the temple, where Amenemhat brings his small offerings on festival days, they talk about Cleopatra with something that sounds like hope. Hope is a precious commodity, rare and fragile in these troubled times. Amenemhat remembers the chaos of recent years, the civil war between Cleopatra and her brother Ptolemy XIII, the armies marching, the disruption of trade, the tax collectors demanding more, always more, to fund battles that common people barely understood. But the priests say that Cleopatra, young as she is, understands Egypt in ways her predecessors did not. That she honors the old gods, that she has spent her own royal fortune, precious gold, to rebuild temples that had fallen into disrepair. Amenemhat's father fought in the army once, during the reign of Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy XII. They called him Auletes, the flute player, more for mockery than affection. Those were hard years. The Romans loomed large, their power growing steadily, their appetite for Egyptian grain seemingly endless. Ptolemy Auletes had fled to Rome once, abandoning Egypt, begging the Romans to restore him to his throne. The taxes to pay for that humiliation fell on people like Amenemhat. But Cleopatra, the priests say, she negotiates with Romans as an equal. The young Julius Caesar himself, the Roman who conquered Gaul and crossed the Rubicon, he came to Alexandria and... The stories are almost too strange to believe, but the priests swear they're true. Cleopatra wrapped herself in a carpet, or perhaps a bag of laundry. The story changes in the telling, and had herself smuggled into Caesar's presence. Bold, dangerous, clever. The water flows through Amenemhat's irrigation channels, directed by the simple shadoof he works with his sons. The mechanism is ancient, unchanged for thousands of years, a counterweighted pole that makes lifting water from the canal almost effortless. Up and down, the rhythm of it meditative, like prayer. The water sparkles in the morning light as it splashes into the smaller channels that feed his plots of wheat and barley. This wheat, most of it will not be his to keep. Cleopatra's tax collectors will come at harvest time, measuring, calculating. The taxes are heavy, perhaps half of what he grows, sometimes more. The grain will be loaded onto boats, transported down the Nile to Alexandria, stored in massive granaries that hold enough wheat to feed armies, to trade for gold and silver, to fund Cleopatra's ambitions. Some farmers resent this. Of course they do. The sweat of their labor, the aching of their backs, and half of it goes to fill royal storehouses. But there's a difference now, subtle but real, under Cleopatra's rule. The tax collectors are not kind, that would be too much to expect, but they follow procedures. There are receipts, records, a sense that the system, however burdensome, has order to it. Under her father, under some of the other Ptolemies, tax collection could be arbitrary, violent, unpredictable. And there's something else, harder to explain, that the farmers feel in their bones. Cleopatra needs Egypt, needs it to be productive, prosperous, because she's locked in a dangerous game with Rome. If Egypt is strong, if the harvest is good, if the granaries are full, then Cleopatra has power, and when Cleopatra has power, Egypt has power. It's a strange thought that their queen's strength and their own prosperity might be linked, but it's a thought that brings a certain, not happiness, but perhaps purposefulness to the labor. The sun climbs toward its zenith, and Amenemhat thinks of resting during the hottest hours. His wife will have prepared a simple meal, bread and beer, perhaps some onions from their garden. The bread will be made from their own wheat, from the portion they are allowed to keep, ground by his wife on a stone quern each morning. The beer will be thick and nourishing, brewed from barley in large clay pots, fermented with dates for sweetness. This is what Egyptians have eaten for millennia, and what they will eat for who knows how long. Cleopatra herself, in her palace in Alexandria, probably eats very different food, exotic dishes from across the Mediterranean. But the foundation of Egypt has always been bread and beer, and that remains unchanged. In Alexandria, at this very moment, while Amenemhat rests in the shade of his small mud brick house, the city pulses with an energy that would be overwhelming to a village farmer. 500,000 people live here, perhaps more, making it one of the largest cities in the world. Greeks and Egyptians, Jews and Syrians, merchants from Rome and Arabia, and even distant India, all flowing through streets that run in perfect grid patterns, designed by Greek architects who wanted to bring order to the chaos of humanity. The harbors, there are 2 of them, separated by the massive causeway called the Heptastadion, are filled with ships. Grain ships, mostly, the heavy cargo vessels that carry Egypt's wealth to feed Rome, to trade in Athens, to supply armies in distant lands. Cleopatra understands, better than most, that Egypt's grain is not just food, it's power, it's leverage. It's the resource that makes Rome pay attention, that makes Rome need Egypt. A dockworker named Neferkare, his name means beautiful is the soul of Ra, though no one calls him that. Everyone just calls him Nef. Loads sacks of grain onto a ship bound for Ostia. He's Egyptian, not Greek, and that matters here in Alexandria more than it matters in the villages. The Greeks run everything that matters: the government, the banks, the major trade houses. Egyptians like Nef do the heavy labor, the work that makes Greek fortunes possible. Nef has never seen Queen Cleopatra, not with his own eyes, but he's heard her voice. Once. 2 years ago, she came to the docks, an unusual thing for royalty, to inspect the grain shipments. She spoke to the overseers in Greek, rapid and commanding, her voice carrying the authority of 3 centuries of Ptolemaic rule. But then, and this is what Nef remembers, what he tells his children about, she noticed a group of Egyptian workers struggling with a particularly heavy cargo. She walked over, still accompanied by her guards and attendants, of course, but she walked over, and she spoke to them in Egyptian, not the simple marketplace Egyptian that some Greeks learn, but proper educated Egyptian. She asked them, "Are the conditions fair? Are you paid on time? Are you treated justly?" The workers, stunned into silence, could barely answer. But later, the overseers made sure that certain abuses stopped. The beatings decreased. The wage payments became more regular. It wasn't paradise. Dockwork is never paradise, but it was better. And the workers knew Cleopatra had done that. Their queen who spoke Egyptian, who remembered that they existed. Nef heaves another sack, 60 pounds of wheat, onto his shoulder and climbs the gangplank. His back aches, will ache tomorrow, will ache forever, probably. He's 35 years old but feels 50. Dockwork ages a man. The grain dust gets in your lungs. The heavy lifting destroys your back. The sun beats down mercilessly. But it's work, and work means food for his family, means his 3 children might have a chance at something better. His oldest son, Hori, is learning to read and write. Not hieroglyphics, those are for priests, but Demotic, the everyday Egyptian script. And some Greek too, because you need Greek to get ahead in Alexandria. He pays a scribe to teach the boy, pays with grain and beer and sometimes a day's labor, but it's worth it. If Hori can read and write, if he can calculate, he might become a clerk, a scribe, something clean, something that doesn't destroy your body. Cleopatra's government employs thousands of scribes because the Ptolemaic administration is vast and complex. Every tax payment must be recorded, every grain shipment documented, every legal contract copied, every military muster roll maintained. Nef dreams, quietly, of his son being one of those scribes, working in a government office, wearing clean linen instead of the rough cotton of a dockworker, coming home without grain dust coating his skin. The ship is Greek-owned, captained by a weathered Rhodium who speaks Greek and just enough Egyptian to shout orders at the dockworkers. The crew is mixed, Greeks and Egyptians working together because the sea doesn't care about ethnicity. A good sailor is valuable whatever language he speaks. The ship will sail north, following the coast, carrying Cleopatra's grain to feed Rome. And Rome, in return, provides something valuable to Cleopatra: recognition, support, protection. The relationship is complicated. Rome is both partner and threat, but Cleopatra navigates these dangerous waters with skill that amazes even her critics. The afternoon heat intensifies, and across Egypt, from the Delta to the First Cataract, millions of people adapt their rhythms to the sun's demands. Work slows, people rest in whatever shade they can find. The market's quiet, the streets empty. Even in bustling Alexandria, the midday hours bring a certain stillness, a collective pause, a recognition that there are limits to what humans can endure under the Egyptian sun. In the palace, though farmers and dockworkers can only imagine it, Cleopatra might also be resting. But her rest is not like theirs. She's reading. She's almost always reading. Greek philosophy, Egyptian history, scientific treatises, diplomatic correspondence. She reads in Greek and Egyptian, in Hebrew and Arabic and Aramaic and more. Her education is extraordinary, tutored by the finest scholars that Alexandria's library and museum can provide. She understands astronomy and mathematics, medicine and philosophy, geography and history. This education matters because Cleopatra is engaged in an intellectual battle as much as a political one. The Romans, powerful as they are, tend to view Egyptians as exotic, ancient, wealthy, but somehow not quite civilized, not truly rational. The Greeks had these prejudices too, seeing Egyptian religion as superstitious, Egyptian government as despotic, Egyptian culture as unchanging and therefore stagnant. But Cleopatra, by mastering Greek learning while honoring Egyptian tradition, by engaging with Roman leaders as an intellectual equal, by understanding both worlds, she challenges these prejudices. When she speaks with Julius Caesar and later with Mark Antony, she doesn't just offer Egypt's wealth, she offers her own mind, her own arguments, her own vision of what Egypt could be and what role it should play in Mediterranean politics. A temple priest named Pachom, serving at the great temple of Ptah in Memphis, understands this in ways that common people cannot. Pachom has met Cleopatra twice during royal visits to Memphis. The first time he was young, junior in the temple hierarchy, standing far back as the queen made offerings to Ptah. But he watched her carefully, saw how she moved through the rituals, speaking the ancient prayers without stumbling, making the prescribed gestures with practiced precision. She had been taught well, or she had taught herself, mastering ceremonies that take years to learn. The second time, just last year, Pachom had risen to a position of more responsibility. He was closer. He heard her speak with the high priest, discussing the temple's needs, its budget, its role in the community. Cleopatra knew the details, knew how much grain the temple received, how many priests it employed, what festivals it celebrated. She spoke about these things with genuine interest, not the bored tolerance of a ruler going through the motions. And then, in a moment Pachom will remember forever, she asked him, a middle-ranking priest of no particular importance, about a specific hymn to Ptah. She had read it in hieroglyphics in some ancient text in the library at Alexandria, and she wanted to know if it was still sung in the temple. Pachom, stunned, managed to confirm that yes, they did still sing it on certain festivals. Cleopatra smiled and quoted the opening lines in ancient Egyptian, perfectly pronounced, perfectly understood. That moment, more than any royal proclamation, more than any building project, told Pachom that something had changed. The Ptolemies had built temples, yes, had made offerings, yes, but they had done so as foreigners honoring alien gods, doing what was politically necessary. Cleopatra, he became convinced, understood something deeper. She saw herself not as a Greek ruler of Egypt, but as, somehow, an Egyptian ruler, a true pharaoh, the living embodiment of Ma'at, the divine order that held the universe together. Whether this was true, whether Cleopatra truly felt this in her heart, or whether it was brilliant political theater, Pacam couldn't say. Perhaps both. Perhaps she had come to believe her own performance. Perhaps she had studied Egyptian civilization so deeply that she had absorbed it, become it, in some essential way. Or perhaps, most likely, she was pragmatic enough to understand that her power depended on Egyptian support, and genuine enough to find meaning and beauty in the Egyptian tradition. The sun begins its descent toward the western horizon, and Pacam walks through the temple complex, checking that everything is prepared for the evening rituals. The Temple of Ptah is ancient, its foundations laid in the Old Kingdom more than 2,000 years ago. It has been rebuilt, expanded, renovated countless times, but its essential purpose remains unchanged. It is the house of the god, the place where heaven and earth meet, the anchor that holds the world in its proper place. Cleopatra has sent gold to Ptah's temple, a substantial gift, for renovations to the hypostyle hall. The work is underway, skilled craftsmen repairing columns, repainting reliefs, replacing worn paving stones. On the walls, new reliefs are being carved, showing Cleopatra in traditional pharaonic regalia making offerings to Ptah. The artists work carefully, following the ancient conventions, the proper proportions and positions that have been used for millennia. But they also include Cleopatra's particular features, her distinctive chin, her thoughtful eyes. These images will outlast Cleopatra herself, will outlast everyone now living, will speak to future generations about this queen, this moment of Greek and Egyptian civilization in one remarkable woman. The artists probably don't think about this as they work, focused on the immediate tasks of chiseling and painting, but Pacam thinks about it. History, he knows, is recorded in stone. The evening ritual begins, oil lamps being lit throughout the temple as natural light fades. The lamps cast a warm, flickering glow, creating moving shadows that make the painted reliefs seem almost alive. Priests chant the ancient hymns, their voices echoing in the stone chambers, the sound unchanged across centuries. Incense smoke rises, frankincense and myrrh, the same scents that priests burned for the god in the age of the pyramids. The ritual has a timeless quality, a sense of participating in something eternal, something that transcends the politics and wars and struggles of mortal rulers. But even here, in this sacred space, Cleopatra's presence is felt. The gold she donated, the renovations she funded, the offering tables laden with goods from her royal estates, her name spoken in prayers, her image carved on the walls. She is woven into the fabric of Egyptian religious life. And that weaving gives her a legitimacy, a power that goes beyond military might or diplomatic skill. In a village near the Fayum, a woman named Hennet prepares the evening meal for her family. The Fayum is one of Egypt's richest agricultural regions, a vast oasis fed by a branch of the Nile, where the land is so fertile that some fields can produce 2 crops per year. Hennet's husband works land that belongs to a wealthy Greek landlord, one of the many Greeks who acquired vast estates in Egypt. But the work is the same work Egyptians have done forever: plowing, planting, harvesting. Hennet has 7 children, 5 still living, a common ratio, a reminder that life in ancient Egypt, even in good times, is precarious. Children die from fevers, from accidents, from illnesses that no one can cure. But Hennet's surviving children are healthy, strong, a blessing from Bes and Taweret, the gods who protect households and children. As she grinds grain on her stone quern, a task she performs every day, a task that will eventually wear down her teeth, just as it wore down the teeth of her mother and grandmother, Hennet thinks about the queen. Not directly, not consciously, but Cleopatra's existence shapes Hennet's life in ways both obvious and subtle. The taxes they pay, the stability of trade that allows her husband to sell surplus produce in the market, the fact that there are no armies marching through the Fayum, no civil war disrupting the harvest. These things matter more than grand politics. Hennet has heard, from a traveling merchant, that Cleopatra has a son by Julius Caesar himself, the Roman general, the most powerful man in the world. The boy is called Caesarion, Little Caesar, and Cleopatra has proclaimed him her co-ruler. The merchant said that Cleopatra takes the boy with her to religious ceremonies, showing him to priests and nobles, teaching him both Greek and Egyptian, preparing him to rule. This matters to Hennet, though she couldn't fully explain why. A child, a future, a continuation. Cleopatra is not just ruling for herself, she's building something that might last. Caesarion might be half Roman, but he's also half Egyptian, or at least his mother is committed to Egypt in ways that matter. The boy might grow up to be a bridge between worlds, a pharaoh who truly understands both halves of his inheritance. Of course, Hennet doesn't know, cannot know how this will end, cannot know that Julius Caesar will be murdered in just a few years, that Caesarion will never truly rule, that Cleopatra's dreams of an independent Egypt allied with, but not subsumed by Rome, will ultimately fail. Cannot know that Egypt's independence, already tenuous, will be completely lost within 2 decades, that Caesarion himself will be killed by Caesar's heir, Octavian, who sees him as a threat. But in this moment, in this peaceful evening in the Fayum, Hennet can hope, can believe that Cleopatra's intelligence and determination might be enough, that Egypt, ancient, resilient, resourceful, might navigate these dangerous times and emerge still itself, still independent, still the gift of the Nile. The children eat their evening meal, bread and lentils, some onions, a little cheese if they're lucky. They sit on the floor of their modest house, mud brick walls plastered with Nile mud, a few simple furnishings, reed mats for sleeping, clay pots for storage. It's not much, but it's theirs. And in a world of such uncertainty, that means everything. After the meal, as darkness settles over Egypt, the rhythms of evening take hold. In cities, oil lamps are lit in wealthier homes. In villages, most people simply go to sleep when it gets dark, conserving expensive lamp oil for when it's truly needed. The night belongs to rest, to dreams, to the mysterious journey that Egyptians believe the soul takes while the body sleeps. But not everyone sleeps. In Alexandria, the palace remains lit. Cleopatra, her advisors say, often works late into the night, reading reports from provincial governors, studying maps, planning, calculating. She knows, everyone knows, that Egypt's position is precarious. Rome's civil wars have made the Mediterranean world unstable. Choosing the right Roman ally, the winning side, is a matter of life and death, not just for Cleopatra, but for Egypt itself. She chose Julius Caesar, and that choice proved wise, for a time. Caesar defeated his rival, Pompey. Caesar came to Egypt and, however it began, whatever the personal dynamics, he supported Cleopatra's claim to the throne against her brother. With Caesar's legions backing her, Cleopatra won Egypt's civil war. Her brother drowned in the Nile. Her younger sister was eliminated. Cleopatra became sole ruler, officially sharing power with her even younger brother Ptolemy XIV. But everyone knew the real power was hers. And for a few years, there was stability. Caesar left. Cleopatra consolidated her power. The harvests were good. The Nile flooded reliably. Trade flourished. Egypt's wealth flowed into royal treasuries, and from there into building projects, temple renovations, the patronage of arts and sciences that made Alexandria the intellectual center of the Mediterranean.
A scholar named Sosigenes, working in Alexandria's great library, studies astronomy with Cleopatra's support. She's interested in astronomy, in the measurement of time, in the great mathematical and scientific questions that fascinate the best minds of the age. Sosigenes doesn't see the queen often, but he benefits from her patronage, from the resources she directs toward the library and museum. His calculations on the length of the year, on the movement of the stars, are precise and elegant. He doesn't know yet, but Julius Caesar will consult him, will use his calculations to reform the Roman calendar, creating what will be known as the Julian calendar, which, with minor modifications, is still used today. This is part of Cleopatra's vision, this support for learning and science. Alexandria, under her rule, is not just a political capital or an economic hub, it's a center of intellectual achievement. The library, containing hundreds of thousands of scrolls, the greatest collection of knowledge in the world, thrives under her patronage. Scholars from across the Mediterranean come to study here, to debate, to discover, to push the boundaries of human understanding. For ordinary Egyptians, this scholarship is distant, irrelevant perhaps. A farmer doesn't need to know the exact length of the year to plant his crops. A dockworker doesn't benefit from new translations of Homer. But there's a trickle-down effect, subtle but real. The engineers who design better irrigation systems, they're trained in Alexandria. The physicians who develop new treatments for disease, they study in Alexandria. The administrators who keep the complex machinery of the Ptolemaic state running, they're educated in Alexandria. And there's something else, something harder to measure, but perhaps equally important. The very existence of the library and museum, of this commitment to knowledge and learning, gives Alexandria, and by extension Egypt, a certain prestige, a certain power that comes not from armies or wealth, but from being the place where important thinking happens, where scholars want to be, where knowledge is created and preserved. Cleopatra understands this. Her power rests on multiple foundations. Military force, yes, she commands armies and fleets. Economic power, yes, Egypt's grain feeds empires. But also intellectual power, cultural power. The power that comes from being seen as civilized, sophisticated, worthy of respect rather than mere exploitation. The night deepens, and in homes across Egypt, people settle into sleep. The wealthy on raised beds with linen sheets, the poor on reed mats on packed earth floors, but all following the same ancient Egyptian practice, sleeping with their heads toward the south, toward the source of the Nile, the direction of life and renewal. Some use wooden headrests, carved and smoothed, uncomfortable to modern sensibilities, but perfect for maintaining elaborate hairstyles and keeping the head elevated in the heat. Dreams are important to Egyptians, not just random images, but messages from the gods, potential warnings of danger, glimpses of the future. In the morning, significant dreams will be discussed, interpreted, perhaps acted upon. Dream interpretation is a recognized skill, with professional interpreters available for consultation. Papyri exist, guidebooks to dreams, explaining what different symbols and scenarios might mean. If a farmer dreams of a flood, it might indicate a good harvest or a disaster. The interpretation depends on details, on context, on the skill of the interpreter.
If a merchant dreams of sailing, it might predict successful trade voyages or shipwreck. Dreams are taken seriously, woven into the fabric of decision-making, part of how Egyptians navigate an uncertain world. Does Cleopatra dream there in her palace, in chambers that Amenemhat the farmer and Neph the dock worker cannot imagine? Surely she must. And what does she dream about? Rome, probably. Julius Caesar, the son they share. Egypt's future, her own precarious position, the knowledge that Roman politics are unstable, that Caesar has enemies, that everything could change. And in 44 BCE, everything does change. Julius Caesar is assassinated, stabbed 23 times in the theater of Pompeii by men who call themselves liberators, by men who fear Caesar's power, who see his relationship with Cleopatra, this foreign queen, as evidence of his tyrannical ambitions. The news takes time to reach Egypt. Ships must sail, messengers must travel. But when the news arrives, when Cleopatra learns that Caesar is dead, that her protector, her ally, the father of her son has been murdered, the implications are staggering. Everything is uncertain again. Rome will descend into civil war, and Cleopatra must choose sides once more, must calculate, must survive. For ordinary Egyptians, the death of Julius Caesar is interesting news, but not immediately relevant to daily life. The Nile will still flood, crops will still be planted, taxes will still be collected. Life goes on. But they watch, they listen, because they've learned that when powerful Romans fight each other, when empires collide, the effects eventually reach everyone. Wars mean disrupted trade, armies that need feeding, increased taxation to fund military campaigns. The years after Caesar's death are complex. Rome splits between Caesar's assassins, claiming to defend the Republic, and Caesar's supporters, led by Mark Antony and Octavian, Caesar's heir. Cleopatra must navigate these treacherous waters. She eventually aligns with Mark Antony, which makes sense militarily and politically. Antony controls Rome's eastern provinces. He's powerful, charismatic, and perhaps more understanding of Egypt's interests than Octavian would be. The relationship between Cleopatra and Mark Antony becomes legendary. Is it love? Is it politics? Is it both? The ancient sources disagree, and modern historians still debate it. But for Egyptians living through this time, what matters is what this relationship means for Egypt. Antony is generous to Cleopatra, returns territories that previous Roman rulers had taken, supports her authority. In return, Cleopatra supports Antony's military campaigns, providing money, grain, ships, Egypt's wealth funding Roman ambitions. In 41 BCE, Mark Antony arrives in Egypt, comes to Alexandria, and the city, that cosmopolitan Greek city that most Egyptians never see, prepares to receive him. The palace is cleaned, decorated, provisions are gathered, the finest wines, the most exotic foods. Musicians are hired, entertainers. Cleopatra, understanding the importance of spectacle, of impression, prepares to dazzle the Roman general. The ordinary people of Alexandria watch these preparations with mixed feelings. It means work, opportunities for some, but also expenditure. Royal resources spent on impressing a Roman, on making Egypt attractive to foreign power. Some resent this, see it as degrading. Others are pragmatic. If Cleopatra can bind this Roman to Egypt's interests, if she can use his power to protect Egyptian independence, then perhaps the spectacle is worth it. A carpenter named Jedi works on decorating the banquet hall where Cleopatra will entertain Antony. He's carving ornate details into cedar wood panels imported from Lebanon. Beautiful work, expensive. Jedi is skilled, trained by his father who was trained by his father. He's proud of his craftsmanship, but he wonders, as he works, what all this is for. To seduce a Roman? to convince him that Egypt is worth protecting, worth allying with, worth loving, perhaps. The stories that emerge from those banquets, passed from palace servants to the general population, are almost unbelievable. Cleopatra's wealth, displayed in ways that seem mythical. Tables groaning with food, wine flowing like water, entertainment that lasts all night. Cleopatra herself, beautiful, clever, charming, matching wits with Antony, speaking his language, understanding his references, making him laugh, making him think, making him want to stay. And he does stay. Months become years. Antony spends winters in Alexandria, goes on military campaigns in summer, returns. Cleopatra bears him children. Twins first, Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene, named for the sun and moon. Then another son, Ptolemy Philadelphus. A growing family, a blending of Greek and Egyptian that mirrors Caesarion's dual heritage. For Amenemhat, still farming near Thebes, still working the same fields, now older, his back more bent, these royal affairs seem distant. But they're not. The taxes that fund Cleopatra's court, that pay for the banquets and buildings and armies, come from farmers like him. The grain that feeds Antony's soldiers is grown by Egyptian farmers. The wealth that makes these royal displays possible flows from the Nile Valley, from the eternal rhythm of flood and planting and harvest. Amenemhat's sons, young men now, sometimes speak of joining the army. Egypt needs soldiers. Antony's campaigns need soldiers. There are opportunities, they say, a chance for advancement, better than farming. Amenemhat is not sure. He's seen war, knows its costs, but he also knows that farming is hard, endless, wearing. Maybe his sons deserve a chance at something different. The priests continue to speak well of Cleopatra. She has not forgotten the temples, has continued funding building projects. The great temple at Dendera, dedicated to Hathor, has been expanded and beautified under Cleopatra's patronage. The Mamissi, the birth house, has new reliefs showing Cleopatra and Caesarion as divine beings, participating in the eternal cycles of birth and renewal that Hathor governs. Pacum, now a high priest at the temple of Pata, has grown old in Cleopatra's service. He's seen the queen several times over the years, watched her mature from a clever young woman into a sophisticated ruler, seen her juggle the demands of Rome and Egypt, Greek and Egyptian, tradition and innovation. She's made choices that displease some, certainly. Her relationship with Antony raises eyebrows among conservative Egyptians who see it as undignified. But she's also made choices that honor Egypt, that respect its gods and traditions, that attempt to preserve its independence in an age when independence is increasingly impossible. The shadows lengthen, in Pacum's memory and in the world. The years of relative stability, when Antony and Cleopatra ruled Egypt together, when their children were young and full of promise, when Alexandria blazed with culture and learning, these years are ending. Octavian, Caesar's heir, has consolidated power in Rome, has eliminated his rivals, and now he turns his attention to his last remaining opponent, Mark Antony, and by extension, Cleopatra. The propaganda war that Octavian wages against Cleopatra is vicious. He portrays her as a foreign seductress, a threat to Roman values, a witch who has enslaved a once great Roman general. The reality is more complex. Antony and Cleopatra are political and military allies as much as romantic partners. But Octavian's propaganda is effective. He convinces Romans that Antony has betrayed his homeland, has become a puppet of an Eastern queen, has abandoned Rome for the decadent pleasures of Alexandria. In 32 BCE, Octavian declares war, not on Antony, technically, but on Cleopatra. This is shrewd.
It frames the conflict not as a Roman civil war, but as Rome defending itself against foreign aggression, against this Egyptian queen who has, in Octavian's telling, corrupted and controlled a Roman general who threatens Rome's interests, who must be stopped. The final confrontation comes at Actium, a naval battle off the coast of Greece in 31 BCE. Antony and Cleopatra's fleet faces Octavian's navy. The details of the battle are disputed. What's clear is the outcome. Antony and Cleopatra's forces are defeated, decisively. They flee back to Egypt, to Alexandria, to face an uncertain future. For Egyptians watching these events unfold, the implications are terrifying. Octavian will invade, will come to Alexandria, will seek revenge, will probably not be interested in preserving Egyptian independence. The careful balance that Cleopatra has maintained, the dance between Greek and Egyptian, between Roman alliance and Egyptian sovereignty, this is ending. The world that has existed for 3 centuries, the Ptolemaic kingdom, is collapsing. In the final year, 30 BCE, as Octavian's forces approach Egypt, Cleopatra makes her final preparations. She tries to negotiate, sends messages to Octavian, offers terms, but Octavian is not interested in negotiation. He wants Egypt. All of it. Its wealth, its grain, its strategic position. And he wants Cleopatra, either as a prisoner to display in his triumph in Rome, or dead. Mark Antony, hearing a false report that Cleopatra has died, takes his own life, falls on his sword in the Roman manner, dies in Cleopatra's arms, according to some accounts. A tragic end to a complicated life. Cleopatra, now alone, makes her choice. She will not be paraded through Rome as a prisoner, will not be displayed as a curiosity, as a defeated queen, will not give Octavian that satisfaction. The story of her death, by the bite of an asp, a cobra, is famous. May be true, may be legend, may be a combination. What's certain is that Cleopatra dies in August of 30 BCE. She is 39 years old, has ruled Egypt for 21 years, has fought wars, made alliances, borne children, built temples, patronized scholars, tried with intelligence and determination and courage to keep Egypt independent in an age when independence was becoming impossible. For ordinary Egyptians, learning of their queen's death, the emotions are complex. Grief, certainly. Cleopatra was, whatever else she was, a figure of remarkable ability. She had honored Egyptian traditions, had learned Egyptian language and customs, had been, in her way, an Egyptian queen as much as a Greek one. Fear, obviously. What will Octavian do? Will there be reprisals, purges? How will Egypt be governed now? And underneath these immediate emotions, a deeper grief. The end of something. Egypt has been independent, more or less, for 3,000 years. An unbroken chain of pharaohs stretching back to Narmer, who united Upper and Lower Egypt before the pyramids were built. A civilization that created wonders, that accumulated wisdom, that persisted through invasions and occupations, always emerging, always continuing. But this time, it doesn't continue, not as it was. Octavian annexes Egypt, makes it a Roman province, a special province, governed directly by the emperor rather than the Senate, because Egypt is too important, too wealthy to be left to normal provincial administration. The grain of Egypt will feed Rome. The wealth of Egypt will enrich Rome. The independence of Egypt is gone. Amenemhat, very old now, hears the news in his village. Cleopatra is dead. Egypt is Roman. The Ptolemaic dynasty, that strange Greek family who somehow became Egyptian pharaohs, is finished. There will be no more independent Egypt. The river still flows, the fields still need planting, the sun still rises and sets. But something fundamental has changed, an ending, a closing of a door. The last pharaoh is gone. He tells his grandchildren about Cleopatra, about the queen who spoke Egyptian, who built temples, who tried to preserve Egypt's independence, who, for a time, seemed to embody the ancient strength and wisdom that had made Egypt great. His grandchildren listen, but they're young. The future that faces them is Roman now. They will grow up as subjects of Rome, as part of an empire. The old Egypt, the independent Egypt, will be only a memory, only stories told by old men like their grandfather. Neph, the dockworker, also old now, still working because there's no retirement for men like him, loads grain onto Roman ships. The work is the same, the grain is the same, but the destination has changed. These ships sail for Ostia more reliably now, feed Rome more directly. Egypt has become Rome's breadbasket, its treasure house, its possession. Pakon, the priest, very old, has seen 4 decades pass since he first glimpsed young Cleopatra in the temple. He conducts the evening rituals as he always has, lights the lamps, burns the incense, chants the ancient hymns. But on the temple walls, in the quiet shadows, Cleopatra's image remains, carved in stone, making eternal offerings to eternal gods, a memory of the last pharaoh, the last independent ruler of Egypt, the end of an era that had lasted 3,000 years. The Nile flows, as it always has, as it always will, indifferent to human politics, to rises and falls of dynasties, to the grief of ordinary people whose lives are shaped by forces they cannot control. The river knows, has always known, that civilizations come and go, that pharaohs rise and fall, that empires expand and crumble. But the river remains, Egypt remains, different now, transformed, but somehow still itself. And in the gentle darkness, as the last lamp is extinguished, as the last prayer is whispered, as sleep comes to farmers and dockworkers and priests and everyone else who lived through these remarkable years, there's a quiet understanding. They witnessed something, the end of something ancient, the transformation of something eternal, the last years of independent Egypt, under a queen who was, whatever else history might say about her, the last of the pharaohs, the last to try, the last to hope, the last to believe that Egypt might remain Egypt, even in a Roman world. And as consciousness fades, as the boundaries between waking and sleeping dissolve, as the eternal human journey into dreams begins, the memories remain of a young queen who spoke Egyptian, who honored the old gods, who tried to preserve something precious, who, for a time, seemed to embody the spirit of Egypt itself. Beautiful, intelligent, determined, doomed. The silence settles, deep and peaceful, over the land of the Nile. The stars wheel overhead in their eternal patterns. The river whispers its ancient secrets, and somewhere, in the continuous thread of memory that connects past to present, Cleopatra remains, not as propaganda made her, not as myth transformed her, but as the Egyptians who lived under her rule knew her, their queen, their last pharaoh, the woman who tried to hold back the tide of history, and failed, but tried magnificently, tried with intelligence and courage, tried because she believed Egypt was worth saving, worth fighting for, worth everything. Rest now, as they rested, in the gentle certainty that some things endure even when empires fall. The river flows, the sun rises, the human spirit persists, and the memory of Cleopatra, Egypt's last pharaoh, continues, carved in stone,
preserved in story, alive in the imagination of anyone who wonders what it was like to live in those final years under the last pharaoh in the last days of ancient Egypt.